Thanks everyone for bearing with us.
Looks like the recording is going. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Borough President Adams' Uniform Land Use Review Procedure public hearing being conducted via the WebEx video conferencing platform. There are two items on the agenda this evening. Please note that this virtual hearing is being recorded to comply with the public law for transparency. It will be available for viewing on Borough President Adams' One Brooklyn channel on YouTube. Viewers may join the hearing via the link and password on the following slide and request to testify via the WebEx chat function by sending a request to all panelists. Viewers may also submit comments to Ask Eric at brooklynbp.nyc.gov for Borough President Adams' consideration. Please call the first item, Richard.
Calendar item number 1, 870 through 888 Atlantic Avenue rezoning. 210335 ZMK, 210336 ZRK, 210260 ZSK.
Thank you. These applications submitted by Y&T Development LLC pursuant to sections 197C and 201 of the New York City Charter for the following land use actions. A zoning map amendment to change 870 through 888 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn Community District 8 from an M1-1 to a C6-3A district. A zoning text amendment to designate a mandatory inclusionary housing area coterminous with the project area, mapped with MIH option 2 and the workforce option. A zoning text amendment to modify New York City zoning resolution section 35-66 to permit a minimum 20-foot sidewalk on Atlantic Avenue and a special permit pursuant to zoning resolution section 74-533 to reduce the accessory parking requirement. The requested actions would facilitate a 17-story mixed residential, commercial, and community facility building with 228 dwelling units, of which 69 would be permanently affordable, 14,500 square feet of retail, and 40 parking spaces. Community Board 8 disapproved this application with conditions on November 10th, 2021. We remind viewers who wish to testify that you must enter your name in the WebEx chat and state intent to speak on the application. Be sure to send it to all panelists. After the presentation and question and answer portion, we will call speakers in order of chat requests. Would Richard Lobel, the representative for this application, please state your name for the record and present the application?
Hi, Richard Lobel of Sheldon Lobel PC for the 870 to 888 Atlantic Avenue rezoning. I'm joined today by Fan Baton from my office, the applicant Yoel Teitelbaum, Nick Liberis, the project architect, as well as Noah Bernstein, the environmental consultant. Can you please load the presentation? Thank you. So we're here today for a rezoning, and it's a series of actions which would include the rezoning of an M11 zoning district to a C6-3A zoning district. This is, of course, within Brooklyn Community District 8 and mirrors other similar rezonings in the area in stepping the bulk and use of properties which are currently zoned M11 and referred to as the Brooklyn Community Board 8 M-Crown area. This project area includes block 1122 and various lots inclusive of roughly 7 lots, 2 of which are part of the development site and will be discussed herein. There's several actions that are proposed as part of this rezoning. The first is the zoning map amendment to change the existing M11 district to a C6-3A district, which is, of course, a residential equivalent of an R9A. The second, a text amendment of zoning resolution appendix F, which would designate the area to be converted from the existing M11 district to allow for the mandatory inclusionary housing over the entirety of the rezoning area. The third would be a text amendment to modify section 3566 to permit a minimum 20-foot sidewalk along Atlantic Avenue. And then finally, a special permit, as is common with many such applications, which would, pursuant to 74-533, reduce the number of required accessory parking spaces. So while I'll step through the initial part of the land use actions for the proposal, I will then shift the presentation over to Nick Liberis, who will present the architectural aspects of the proposal, and then the entire applicant team will be available to answer questions. I would only add from an administrative standpoint that it appears that Mr. Liberis is an attendee of the meeting, so he may need to be promoted in order to present. So to start, this action would facilitate the development of 870 to 888 Atlantic Avenue with a new, at the time of this proposal, 17-story mixed residential, commercial, and community facility building with approximately, again at the time of the proposal, 228 dwelling units, including roughly 69 to 70 permanently affordable units and local retail. Next slide. So we would first locate the site. Although difficult to see, the site is located within the M11 zoning district along Atlantic Avenue, which was previously the subject of other land use applications before the Brooklyn Borough President. Next slide. The tax map here demonstrates a little bit more clearly the boundaries of the proposed rezoning. So one slide previous, please, is the tax map, which demonstrates the roughly 7 lots included within the rezoning area. There we go. Getting dizzy. So that is the red lines designate the development site totaling 20,000 square feet of lot area, with the remaining sites totaling roughly 15,000 square feet. Next slide. So you can see from the land use map here why this rezoning makes sense. Among other reasons, you've got Atlantic Avenue, an extra wide thoroughfare here, which at 120 feet represents one of the largest thoroughfares in Brooklyn in this area. In addition to the excellent site access provided by Atlantic Avenue, you also have the residential blocks immediately, not only along this block, but to the south of this, many of which were rezoned in the context of the Crown Heights West rezoning, upwards of R6B, R6A, and R7A. So that was prior to the time of mandatory inclusionary housing. And now this would set as a goal for this rezoning to allow 25 to 30% of these residential units to be created for affordability. This is permanently affordable residential, as is indicated in other applications. And so this would really help accomplish many of the goals of the surrounding area, not only to allow for commercial activity at ground level along Atlantic, but also in an area where density is able to be incorporated on such a large thoroughfare to allow for the generation of residential units, which are not only sorely needed, but of course, affordable units. Next slide. This is a picture of the zoning change map. So you can see that there's an existing upzoning upwards of R9X to the west of the project site. There's a C63A that is proposed over the project site, and additional R7A districts are in the area of the project site. Prior rezonings within Community Board 8 have, of course, included private rezonings to R7A and R7D, with Atlantic Avenue being the most recent location of these applications. Next slide. So with that, I would transfer the presentation over to Nick with the understanding that the land use map here, in addition to demonstrating that this is currently M11, also demonstrates that you have underutilized sites, vacant sites, or sites with underutilized buildings of 1 to 3 stories, auto-related uses, car sales and such. So this is really an opportunity to, with minimal to no displacements on these lots, to allow for a lively residential development with ground floor retail uses, which would benefit the area both in terms of activity and in terms of employment. So with that, I would pass the mic over to Nick Liberis, who can discuss some of the particularities of the zoning district as well as the proposed development. Nick?
Thank you, Rich. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for having us. Just to follow up with what Rich was saying, I mean, there's no displacement that would happen here because the amount of affordable housing coming in greatly surpasses the amount of housing just in general that exists on these blocks currently. And I can't speak to any projection of any future displacement, and I don't think I haven't seen anything really convincing that makes the argument for that. But in this case, it's very clear that there's a lot of affordable housing that would be coming in with such a rezoning in a way which would be nothing but beneficial. So this is the map on this slide of the M Crown, the proposed M Crown setup, where you have along Atlantic a high density commercial corridor, which leads into a light manufacturing section a little bit further down, and then you have these mixed MX districts to the south. The next slide, please. This is showing the subject application vis-a-vis the other applications that are in process and the ones that have passed. This application is generally in the same vein in terms of how much bulk and how much density it's asking for as these other ones that have passed in the recent past, and they're all generally conversant with the M Crown framework. There's generally about somewhere between 0.75 and 1 FAR beyond what the framework asks for, with the understanding that there is some sort of community give back to gain that extra FAR, that extra density, which itself is also generating some more affordable housing units. Next slide, please. This is something where we were looking at a comparative analysis of something which was recently done as an R9A equivalent by city planning, which is the 4th Avenue corridor for the Gowanus rezoning. And not only is it a similar scale just in terms of the streetscape, it's also surrounded on both sides in a very similar way to the Atlantic Avenue corridor with stuff which is of R7A to R6B type of density, and it was very striking to us that this was such a clear equivalent, and we think this is why city planning has been so supportive of this higher bulk. Next slide, please. This is showing the site's proximity to the local transportation. You have a lot of options over here. While it's not exactly accurate to say that you're super proximal to the Barclays hub, you're still about maybe three-quarters of a mile out. There's a lot of bus service in this area. There's a lot of trains in this area, and this is a very, obviously like a very busy corridor for all sorts of vehicles. Next slide, please. This was the first proposal that we were presenting to the community. This is what we've been kind of working off as a baseline for the past 18 months, let's say. And the proposed building in this stage was 175 feet high. We had about 228 units, and the number of MIH units was 69 at an option 4. The option 4 was in response to stuff that we heard from the community board, where there were people coming forward and saying that they were priced out of options 2 and option 1, and we found it compelling that this could be something where we would be providing housing for people that work for the city, people that were in the civil services, like local, like firefighter, police, type of occupations. And this seemed sound until Gib Bocconi, maybe two months back, shared some demographic information that changed all of our minds on it. And Sandy from Rich's office was in the midst of doing some other research, which by Kismet was something that was very useful to this, and he was able also to back this up, and it really changed everybody's thinking about what the most appropriate type of MIH that should be offered is. So that we'll talk about shortly. So you can see over here we have 8.5 FAR. At this point, we were proposing about 0.64 FAR for commercial. There was a community facility component that we were proposing at 0.08 FAR. The total square footage of the building was about 170,000 square feet. We were asking for a partial parking waiver. The site is right off of Atlantic. There's a lot of traffic there, and for something of this size, it's the responsible thing to do to provide some parking, both as an amenity and also for something for the area, just because of where it is, in like proximity to all this other commercial program. Next slide, please. So this was the cellars and the ground floors that we're proposing. We had the parking, we had some building amenity, and you can see it here in the cellar, and on the first floor we had some M-Crown use, in addition to some community facility use, which was either going to be a school. The client had been talking to this local school, and he was also talking to a local art gallerist. So we had configured the space in a way which could accommodate either flexibly. Next slide, please. The next few slides are just typical floor plans for the building as it's configured in the renderings. Next slides, please. We could just go through the floor plans until the end. Keep going, please. Keep going. Thank you. Okay, so this was showing the unit breakdown over here. We took special care with this building because we had anticipated that the community board wanted us to keep things lower. So what we did was work very hard to keep the base heights low towards the center in a way that kind of disaggregated the building form. And this was something that we think gives a much better feel from the street. And it's something that we think is much more attractive insofar as that it's not like a much bigger, blockier mass. And what makes this possible is in part the R9A zoning, because what this gives you is a height which is disproportionate to the amount of FAR that you get. The one FAR that you get, roughly between the R8A and the R9A comes with 30 feet of height a difference. And this was something that when we had initially showed this to everybody, and when we showed this to city planning, this was like one of the more remarkable features, was that when we were able to get this extra height, we were able to kind of be more sensitive, to how this thing massed. To the east over here, for example, you could see that we're not even getting to the full height of the building. There's this piece over here which is coming up higher, and this is something that we thought was very, very valuable, because when you consider something that's of this size, often the thing that's the most oppressive about it is its like uniformity. So there's something which is lacking, like just in terms of like a scalar element, something that the human, from the street can kind of relate their own like body to. So when something is broken up like this, it's just it's less imposing, and it's something that offers a more friendly presence to the street. So that extra height gave us the opportunity to do this. And you can also see that it's pocked with all these different voids over here, which are different terraces. So this was something that we felt, kind of helped like reduce the appearance of this bulk. Next slide, please. So you can see this building over here. The way that the form is actually appreciated from anything close to the street level is as two separate tower structures, because of how this middle portion gets set back. Again, this is an effort to make this a more graceful building form, not a big blocky thing, not something which is a tower, which is kind of trying to do something which is a little bit funkier, but in the end is probably also kind of oppressive. Next slide, please. This was showing the proposed 175-foot tall structure in context with the stuff that was in the neighborhood currently, and then looking from the vantage point of further down Atlantic within the future Pacific Yards development. Pacific Park. Next, please. Next slide. This was the view at the end Waverly, you can see the two disaggregated building forms fairly clearly, and then how all the different terraces, work to make it less oppressive. Next slide, please. This is a view more from the street, looking west. There were two features here that we were working with the arts program in this phase to incorporate into the building facade, and there are these rectangular pieces that kind of protrude that aren't fenestrated, that are colored gold here. And the idea here, this is something that the majority leader had asked us to consider. She liked these embellished portals, and she had shown us a couple of them, and we saw an opportunity to use that to emphasize this opening, and also to have these features which were contemplated as being vitrines for displaying many different types of art, all sorts of media, anything from digital to some sculpture. And the thought was that we'd be working with the gallerist basically to turn this into like a mobile display, where there would be people that would, there'd be art that would be cycling in and out, and it would be something which could really enliven the street front. But we've changed the scheme a bit. Not that this couldn't be still incorporated if it was something that people desired, but we've kind of we've been focusing on other parts of the building. Next slide, please. So 175 feet was the proposal that we came in with. We had thought that option 2 would be the more appropriate option after hearing Gibbs' facts and figures, but option 2, was really at the outer edge of the most appropriate option, and it's something that we, that was acknowledged. So the two things that the community board were requesting were some higher affordability and a lower building. So the next slide, please. So what we ended up doing with this amended proposal was packing all of the FAR for the C63A into a 15-floor building. This is something that we were able to do by stepping back over the sidewalk. We have a 30-foot rear yard, which is required. And what this means is that to get that height, the height reduction, we had to bulk up the front of the building. So this is something that we could do while still maintaining the playfulness of that slightly taller version. And the way that we're able to do this is by stepping out 8 feet back over the sidewalk. City planning had asked us to consider making a 20-foot wide sidewalk, and it was something that was first presented to us as like a precondition for the rezoning, similar to the sidewalk widenings for the special permits. What became apparent was that it wasn't something which was mandatory. So after some consideration, what we thought was that it's appropriate to have a wider sidewalk here because of the width of the street, because of the height of the buildings. But in order to be able to drop the building, this is something that we felt was a sensible compromise. So you're able to maintain the sidewalk width. Part of it would be overhung by the building. This overhang in a concrete superstructure is nothing remarkable. There's no real structural gymnastics that you would have to do to get such cantilever. So this is what we would propose to keep the building lower. And where we ended up settling was option 3 for the affordable housing. This results in 42 units out of 206 units total. The other thing that we were proposing was a first floor of a commercial, with some given over to the M Crown as per the most recently stipulated community benefits agreement that the Eli Pariente signed for the Pacific Grand. And this is something where we'd be offering 30% of the ground floor for these non-residential uses. Next slide, please. The way that these units would be broken down, you can see the different AMI tranches over here. At that option 3 level, you would be at 40% average. So we would have 21 2-beds, 11 1-beds, 6 3-beds, and 4 studios. And what this adds up to, this would be the option within the provision of MIH in 23951, where you do 50% 2 beds, 25% 1-beds, and then the rest as any mix that's desired. So you could see what those rents would be. The 3-bed would be about $1,000 a month. The 2-bed $900, the 1-bed $756, and the studio about $600. Next slide, please. This is the revised ground floor plan that we submitted in response to the community board's requests, where we give 30% of the ground floor for the M crown. And you could see here that it's very, very similar to what we had set up before. We have an egress corridor on the easternmost side of the retail, right next to the ramp, that both results the egress from the building up above. We think that this is something that is going to be necessary because of the depth of the retail. So we just showed it now. The way that we're showing the building cores is it's not something that's set in stone. I mean, this building could be configured any number of ways. This width is at the edge of where you would start to consider putting in another core. And this is my friend Jay. Jay, this is a presentation to the Borough President.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah. And so Jay has a very firm hand. It's great. This is so you have this is very like illustrative, I would say. Depending on how you configure the upper building, you would place the cores in any number of ways. So you wouldn't end up with two cores in such a building, and if you ended up with something that was a lot blockier, there's a strong chance that you would have a centralized core. So that would also change some of the parameters here. Next slide, please. This was a rendering where we were looking at what it would look like with a slightly reduced height. So you can see that it's really not. It's a very marginal effect. And on the rear side of the block, the way that the rezoning seemed to be going, it seems like everything is an R7A. And even in an R6A, we did a bunch of studies that showed conclusively that at that height, it would be impossible to perceive the height of these buildings on like Atlantic Avenue, even to a height of like 185 feet. Obviously, before stuff is filled in on this block, because this, as Rich said, is the block which is the most blighted, right? There's not a lot there. It's car storage. It's like low, like retail, stuff that's generally fairly low. As it fills in and you have a taller building on the north side of the block, obviously it would be perceivable, but as everything fills in with R6A, it would be something that would not be perceived, and thus not a nuisance, I think. One other thing to consider is that everything on this block would be only overshadowing to the north. All of the shading studies that we did, conclusively demonstrated that that the shading barely reached across the street for most of the year. This is because of the angle of the street. So it's a really well set up when you consider all of these factors for some extra density, I think. Next slide, please. This was a view of this was like a test shot of a nighttime view that was also looking at the lower building. These are placeholders for the vitrine objects This is at the point where we were having conversations with this with the majority leader. But you can see, I mean, you could see how like how the terraces do, something to kind of enliven the street experience. It brings down the height of the building to a more manageable, like relatable scale from the street. Next slide, please. We're always considering ways to make these buildings more and more efficient. The nature of like building is inherently sloppy to some degree, right? Because these things they're always prototypes. They're always composites, right? So anytime that you have something where you're bringing disparate materials into join with each other, you're going to have conditions where it's very difficult for these things to be to be perfectly joined. So when we consider this, like when we consider the reality of manufactured assemblies, the number one thing that really helps when it comes to keeping things efficient is to really over insulate stuff. And right now the energy code has become much more restrictive, and it's helped a lot. But there's also financial incentives that have been picking up in the recent years, most noticeably PACE now coming in, which paired with the Con Ed Clean Heat program, we think is going to like really revolutionize the performance of all the buildings coming in. We've been told in no uncertain terms by Con Ed that the clean heat stuff right now is not going to continue at the rate that it currently is. So it's important for all these buildings coming in now to really get going quickly, just so they could avail themselves of this. If you're not familiar, this is a rebate, which gives you about $150 per square foot once you meet a certain threshold of energy savings. And it was recently in July pumped up to about $400 a square foot. So we're hoping that stays until the spring. So stuff like that. There's all sorts of new building NYSERDA grants. There's a couple federal grants. But these are all things that are in place right now to really make this stuff as sustainable as anything that's ever been built in the city. As you guys know, there's a new local law that asks you to put in green roofing and/or solar panels on all stuff that's not rec space or that's not mechanical space. The new energy code requires you to have quite a beefed up roof, irrespective of that. So between all of this insulation, between all of these incentives towards efficiency, it's a great time. We think in the next couple years, it's a great time to be building in New York City if this is something that you're into doing. And we hope very much, that these projects get approved and that we could proceed with them and, add to a very, like a very worthy, just add some worthy building stock, to the city in this area where it's very much needed. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time.
And with that, we conclude the applicant presentation with the exception of one comment we'd like to make for the record. While we understand that there's community members and representatives of the community board here tonight, and we would not deign to speak for them, we can speak as an applicant. And as an applicant who's been involved in the process for over 3 years, there's a lot of people to answer to. And so when we came into this process, it was with the understanding that the applicant had a solid land use rationale for an R9A district at a 17-story building. And this is particularly in light of the guidance and discussions with the Department of City Planning, who since that date have held firm to that and have also made their own presentations before the Brooklyn Borough Presidents Land Use Office, as well as the Commission and the Community Board, as to why Atlantic Avenue is particularly appropriate for this height and bulk. So when we look to that, that's the reason for the genesis of this proposal as was originally proposed. But we also understand that there's the community involved, and having been involved for years in land use and full board hearings at Community Board 8, we are, of course, aware of their M-Crown resolutions, of which two goals are affordable housing and jobs. And so we felt and continue to feel that the affordability created here, particularly in light of recent discussions around this proposal, have created true affordability and will create true affordable units for those who are not as fortunate in the area, as well as commit to creating real high paying and quality jobs for local residents. So with that, and with what we note to be the reductions that were appreciated and happily conceded to by the applicant in the building design, as discussed by Nick, we feel that it's not a small thing. It's not a small thing to take 2 to 3 stories off your building. It's not a small thing to commit to very specific uses, but we did it happily, knowing that we are partners here with the community, and we don't want a rezoning, we want a project. And so with that, we're happy to answer the questions from the Brooklyn Borough President's office, and the entire applicant team is here.
And just to our people who signed in to speak for the chat, some people did not specify which application they want to speak on. If you didn't do that, please re-message us which application, or if it's for both. Thank you. And again, when we go with speakers, we're going to start with only speakers in this application. So please keep your remarks to this application. Thank you.
Yes, you'll have to be called back again for the second application if you wish to speak on both. So thank you, Richard. I have several questions. Some of them you addressed, but let me get them into the record. Given Community Board 8's general M-Crown position regarding envisioned use, height, and density along Atlantic Avenue and its adopted resolution for this section of the block, as well as its recommendations adopted on November 10th, one, why should this proposal, which exceeds the express height and density by 20%, backs properties capped at 5 stories, exceeds residential floor area by more than 60,000 square feet, and proposes 37,000 square feet less non-residential floor area be supported? And 2, to what extent is the applicant willing to make further modifications?
Sure. So thank you for the question. So, looking at the M-Crown resolutions as amended, there were certain understandings and a certain genesis of bulk in this area. So there were the 1010 and 1050 Pacific Street rezonings, which resulted in accepted bulk of R7A or 4.6. There was the Grand Pacific rezoning, which resulted in an R7D or 5.6. So now we come to Atlantic Avenue, and the M-Crown resolutions requested 6 to 7 FAR on Atlantic. The application exceeds that and is now requesting an R9A, although obviously there have been modifications. So there'd be 2 points. The first is with regards to why we feel this should be supported. There are land use professionals who are Department of City Planning planners, directors, and commissioners who feel that additional bulk along Atlantic Avenue is something which should be supported. And so the general statement is that when you have a 120-foot corridor, which is central to transportation and is currently underutilized to not utilized for any productive use, the idea of creating not just residential units here, which benefits and alleviates residential housing pressure, but also importantly, permanently affordable units is something that's important. So while we understand that this is a process, an iterative process, and we've fully engaged the community board and community stakeholders, we think that it is important here to create residential units to allow for the development to be tied to M-Crown uses, to create real jobs, and that doing so, particularly in light of the changes to the proposal, does something in a way that's respectful of the area and respectful of the community board. So in light of their November resolutions regarding this application, we note that our revised proposal with a reduced height to 150 feet, as well as tying the application and the proposal to M-Crown uses, those are the reductions and those are the modifications which have been proposed to allow this application to more closely align with that expressed intent. So that's why we feel it's justified, and those are the modifications which we were happy to make.
Thank you. And regarding
I just want to jump in. Sorry, Jeff.
Oh, go ahead.
So, Richard, you mentioned 30% of the ground floor. Nick mentioned that. Could you turn that into square footage? Because I do want to point out that M-Crown restricted uses weren't in the resolution for Atlantic. So I'd like to understand to what extent by square footage, how much you're going above and beyond the M-Crown.
Sure. So if we're able to bring up the ground floor plan, Nick, can you just weigh in on the percentage in the lot area that's devoted, the floor area that's devoted to M-Crown uses?
Yeah, sure. The way that it's been set up, so the lot is about 20,000 square feet. We were doing 30% of the total commercial ground floor because of the residential lobbies, because of the loss factor due to the ramp. We were down to about 15,000 square feet. So 30% of that, gave us about 4,500 square feet, which was approximately 25% of the whole lot. So we thought that was a good equivalent for what had been approved before at that 25% of the lot.
So basically, you're saying to put in this 4,500 square feet that the community board didn't ask for. You're kind of saying it might be okay then to put in more than 30,000 square feet less commercial and still exceed the bulk by the approximately 20%. That's what you're trying to leverage as what's in balance here.
Well, it's an interesting question. I think what you're saying is that we're in excess of what was recommended, or we're in excess of what's your baseline?
Well,
Well,
can I go to some of the specific numbers, Richard? Is that possible?
Sure.
Okay, so, as per the discussion that evening, the community board was kind enough to share their calculations with regards to the proposal. And with regards specifically to non-residential uses, the idea was that there was going to be a reduction over what was proposed for M-Crown of roughly 14,000 square feet of non-residential floor area. But there was a corresponding factors, and really two factors. The first would be that the affordability proposed for the project would exceed what was requested by M-Crown and create, an overage of affordable units. So that was one of the counteracting factors. And the second, of course, being that M-Crown floor area was not restricted on Atlantic Avenue in the M-Crown resolutions to date. So not only does the applicant restrict that square footage, as was indicated by Nick, to M-Crown uses, but I think more importantly, it's not merely just the M-Crown uses as had previously been contemplated by the committee and the board, but also more restrictive M-Crown uses. So the resolutions that night indicated use groups 7B, 8B, 9A, 11, 16A, D, 17B, and 18A. So, it's important to note that this goes above and beyond what would have been required under the M-Crown resolutions to a greater extent. Again, I don't want to discuss what the community board's view is on this. They'll be able to share that with you. But with regards to the restrictions on the applicant and the site, we do feel that that was somewhat offsetting for the additional requested floor area.
Well, that's the key. What we'll have to take in when we review it is to what extent that is somewhat offsetting.
Of course.
Thank you. Regarding the requested elimination of 24 required parking spaces, given the significant cost reduction for the developer, to what extent is the project providing additional public benefit beyond the required MIH floor area?
And I actually, we have different information tonight. It actually seems to be 46 spaces because we got that off a different drawing that had a lower number, that had less required. So it's a reduction of 46 you're asking for from what you presented tonight.
All right, so I think, first of all, to the extent that the Borough President's office wants to discuss the environmental and area implications on these parking spaces, I know Noah Bernstein is available and can discuss that. I'd say simply that, that again, we're seeking a development here. We're not seeking a rezoning, we're seeking to build this building. And so the reduction in parking, I think, is part and parcel of the project. The restriction as far as the M-Crown uses are concerned, the additional affordability as is provided, all of these things lend themselves to the creation of an entirety of a project. Part of that is the reduction in parking as well. So, we would simply note that the reduction in parking has been proposed pursuant to the special permit is not only something which is frequently adopted by the City Planning Commission on similar applications, but importantly has been part of the project for the entirety of the project. This is not something which, if we have negotiated up or down, this is something which has allowed us to go forward first with the original proposal and second with the revised proposal to come closer to M-Crown. So, you know, that's kind of how we would answer that.
And regarding the intended affordable housing units, what's the qualifying income range for prospective households based on household size? And what are the anticipated rents based on number of bedrooms? And what is the distribution of units by bedroom size?
All right, so I think we actually have a slide which Nick may have presented, which states that concisely, and we're happy to review that. So again, to the extent that you know, the application was presented with other options, but to the extent that option 3 was selected, you're looking at 40% AMIs, allowing for studios at 598, through 1 bedrooms at 756, 2 bedrooms at 900, and then 3 bedrooms at 1,032. The proposed breakdowns of the units are included in the you know, in the on the sheet. You can see towards the bottom. And I would also note that merely with regards to median income, one of the, I think, more productive conversations of the community board was that 40% AMI allows for AMIs which really come down to income levels that reflect actual AMIs toward, you know, within community board aid. So those would include from family sizes of 1s for studios, annual incomes of $33,000, for family sizes of 2, $38,000, and for family sizes of 3, $42,000. So with family sizes of 4 at $47,000. So you can see that per the AMIs here, per the rentals as well as the income levels, you're really able to achieve some really meaningful affordability, with, of course, the unit breakdown being the same as the general breakdown for the population that would be renting market rate units.
Richard, just for clarity, again, that 33,000, for example, for one is an average at 40, but that people earning for the 30% category would be roughly 75% of that number, and the people at, if it was at 50%, would be another 20% more of salary, you know, within a few $1,000 range to qualify for these units.
Correct. So as an illustrative matter, again, for the family size of 1 at 30% AMI, you're looking at roughly 25,000. For a family size of 1 at 50% AMI, you'd be up to 41,000. So yes, in that general range.
Next question. Could you identify what marketing strategies, for example, designating one of the community's affordable housing nonprofits as the affordable housing administrating agent, would be used in the tenant selection process to ensure the highest level of participation from Community District 8, especially those that are rent burdened or at risk of displacement? And would such a marketing strategy start off with a financial literacy campaign to assist area residents in becoming lottery eligible?
Sure. So we would note that despite the fact, of course, that this is a lengthy process and that the applicant is not yet building a building, we are cognizant of the concerns of the Brooklyn Borough President's office, and so would consult with the Brooklyn Borough President as well as the newly elected council member prior to a selection of the administering agent from the approved list. Having said that, the applicant has spoken to an administering agent from the HPD selected list and confirmed one that is one of the more reputable administering agents who has a lot of experience as an administering agent in this area. They've confirmed their availability for this project, and we've also had those thorough discussions regarding conducting a robust financial literacy campaign. So that's something that we would have asked the administering agent to have a hand in, but we, you know, as a matter of record, we have started those conversations and are excited to move forward in that regard.
And Richard, I want to add that your bedroom mix is very family oriented. We don't typically get that from projects that are mostly market rate, and that's something the Borough President has consistently asked for. So that would be appreciated to see a project deliver like that, actually.
We understand. Thank you, Richard.
And I know you touched on this a little bit, but it's the Borough President's policy to promote the use of renewable energy resources focused on advancing a sustainable future in Brooklyn. It's also his policy to promote practices to retain stormwater runoff. What consideration has been given, possibly in cooperation with the DEP, the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, NYSERDA, or NYPA, to incorporating passive house design, blue, green, or white roofs covering solar roof and/or facade panels, roof-mounted microgrid batteries, wind turbines, and/or DEP curbside rain gardens?
I would defer this conversation to Nick, and also I think the last slide may have contained some of those measures.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, the best thing you could do is always reduce the energy usage. So that's what we're always trying to do. So it's, like renewables great, but if you could reduce the amount that you need to, to as little as you can, that's always the best thing. With passive house, I mean, passive house in such a project is becoming more and more practicable. We have a bunch of passive house projects going on right now, actually. It's not that much of a lift with a new build. Obviously, if you're doing retrofits and you have to commission this thing at the end, it's a huge pain. But this is something which is very, very, very doable. And with all those incentives that I had previously mentioned, it's something that is within reach, I think, for many projects. Something of this size, I think it's a there's no way that it doesn't make sense. It's very easy to get triple paned glass right now. Geothermal is very, very heavily subsidized, and would make a lot of sense over here. So to that extent, we're at the right place at the right time historically, and we should be building this stuff because it will happen if we build this stuff soon. With regard to the stormwater, I mean, I'm sure you guys know that every single project has to have a detention tank right now because it's almost impossible with the codes from 2016, I want to say, that added in the new overflow drains. It's almost impossible to get the roof detention that you need without like severely limiting the amount of drains that you have in a way that kind of is not the best practice. So you always end up with a detention system. DEP doesn't let you build things unless you have such a system. So I think like lots of these questions are the city's done a good job legislatively, and a lot of them I think are answered by the current code. Thank you.
Nick, given the height, have you looked at micro wind turbines? And given the public realm redoing the sidewalk in front, the idea of the DEP rain gardens, have you looked into working with DEP to put in such a system along the 200-foot length of Atlantic they have?
Yes, we have, and we're very much into doing the BPPs for every single project, because what it lets us do is like very, very carefully curate how you interface the sidewalk with the building. So we've been looking into like different porous paving solutions to kind of complement that thing. So maybe you could end up with like an even bigger swale than just the rain gardens. So it's something that we are looking into. We have one that we'll be filing in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be the first one, which is which ties everything in, that will get approval. So if you like, we can keep you posted about how that goes. And we're doing right now the world's largest spec office passive house building. It's an LIC, and there's all sorts of stuff that we're like investigating over there. So we'll keep you posted about that as well.
Thank you. It's the Borough President's policy to maximize quality jobs for Brooklynites. Could you please outline what steps will be taken to ensure the inclusion and participation of minority and women-owned business enterprises and/or local business enterprises during the construction process?
Sure. So I think the first thing I'd note is that per the public comments, 32BJ is in support of the application. We're proud of that fact. We know that Yoel has engaged in a thorough conversation with 32BJ. So as far as union representation generally, we're confident in that moving forward. With regards to LCE and MBWE employees, workers, contractors, subcontractors, the intention has always been that the applicant was going to engage in 421A relief, which would have been available at the time had we been in the ground. Obviously, that's not the case, but we would look forward to some sort of program, providing for similar relief. And to that extent, we understand that MBWE participation is an integral part of qualifying for that program. So we would provide, at a minimum, would provide whatever the such regulations would provide for. And again, we do look forward to the participation of 32BJ in the project.
And also, the ICAP is still here, so the ICAP also compels you to have such setups as well. So you could be assured that it's going to happen because of that.
I just want to give a quick reminder to viewers who wish to testify that you must enter your name in the WebEx chat, state your intent to speak on the application, and send it to all panelists. After that presentation and question and answer portion, we'll call speakers in order of chat requests. Ina, do we have speakers?
Yes, we have a list of speakers, and I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name. Our first speaker is Gib Viconi of Community Board 8.
Hi, good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Community Board 8. Before going into the Community Board's recommendations on this application, I'd just like to mention a couple of comments in response to what I heard from the applicants. First, a couple times demographic information that I provided to the applicants was mentioned. I just want to say that this is information that was prepared by the Department of City Planning and presented to the Community Board in December of last year, not information that I tabulated on my own. I also want to mention there was mention made of by Nick of the M-Crown uses for Grand Pacific being the ones that are being committed here for the 4,700 square feet in the 870 building. That's not exactly accurate. I think Richard Lobel mentioned more correctly that the resolutions Community Board 8 passed actually call for a narrower list of uses for the space that's being committed for M-Crown non-residential use, and that was to focus on uses that specifically are light industrial uses, which is the larger sort of objective of M-Crown. When as was mentioned earlier, the Community Board denied support for this application pending a neighborhood-wide rezoning of the M-Crown district in accordance with the board's earlier resolutions. The board recognizes the fact that it's been very elusive getting this neighborhood rezoning done. We have a new administration coming in and taking office and a new city council member. So it's very, very hard to know what the opportunities may be at that point. So the Community Board also, in anticipation of perhaps the landscape changing by the time the new administration and the new city council member take office, outlined other scenarios that potentially could be explored if it is not possible to achieve a neighborhood rezoning. The first one involves the applicant withdrawing its applications, refiling a text amendment to create a contextual variation of the C61 zoning district with required non-residential frontage consistent with the regulations of the Special Enhanced Commercial District, with a base FAR of 6 and incentive FAR of 1 for non-residential use. This is the zoning tool that is outlined in the Community Board's resolution of September of 2019. It doesn't exist right now, but it would be desirable for that zoning to be in place. If it is not possible to do that, the Community Board would like to consider in lieu of the proposed C63A zoning that The lots that are not controlled by the applicant be rezoned C62A, matching the zoning of lots 9 and 10, that all lots be mapped MIH options 1 and 3, and the applicant make the following binding commitments. First, to restrict the use of a minimum of 4,700 square feet of floor area to use groups 7B, 8B, 9A, 11, 16A, 16D, 17B, and 18A. Second, to offer required affordable apartments under MIH option 3. And third, to limit the building height to 15 stories. This is, as was pointed out earlier, the commitments for M-Crown uses on Atlantic Avenue and for MIH3 are in excess of what would be required under the community board's M-Crown resolutions on Atlantic Avenue, and should be considered in exchange for the additional density sought. If it's not possible to receive binding commitments for those things, the community board has asked the applicant make a commitment subject to the establishment of C62A zoning to restrict residential use on the lots to 5.2 FAR, which would provide for 2 floors of non-residential. And if that's not possible, that we would recommend the lots be rezoned C4 5D. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak this evening.
Our next speaker is Peter Crashes of the North Prospect Heights Association.
Yes. Hi, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm just going to read a brief statement from the North Prospect Heights Association and then continue on with some personal comments. I'm also a member of the Community Board 8 Land Use Committee as a public member. We are deeply concerned, this is North Prospect Heights Association. We are deeply concerned by the emergence of individual private ULURP applications for Atlantic Avenue, and we call on Borough President Adams to reject them. We continue to support the longstanding but clearly challenged commitment of the Borough President, Majority Leader Cumbo, and Brooklyn Community Board 8 for community-led neighborhood-wide rezoning of the northern parts of Prospect Heights and Crown Heights. The use of individual private applications to unlock development potential on Atlantic Avenue undercuts the community's leverage to develop a holistic plan that addresses, with the 6,450 new units of housing already approved for Atlantic Yards Pacific Park, the implications of an eventual near doubling of Prospect Heights' population by new development on public infrastructure. It further fails to address the implications of indirect displacement caused by the introduction of such a large number of new market rate units. These proposals should be rejected, and we ask our next city council member and mayor to work with us to deliver a better plan. I just want to add some comments. I'm personally really quite alarmed that what's unfolding here is a development of a neighborhood based on a menu of items which for-profit developers volunteer to chef for us. We're letting we will be letting city agencies off the hook and our elected officials off the hook and leave the community with changes that may contradict declared goals. While imperfect, neighborhood-wide plans have far broader scope, including programs and funding for displacement, mitigation, and infrastructure improvements. These are benefits that individual applications cannot deliver. The greater density ushered in by these individual applications increases adverse impacts on the community, while at the same time, the piecemeal way the new zoning districts are being constructed ironically takes away the community's leverage to meaningfully address adverse impacts. Just as importantly, the wider community's ability to participate in a timely, transparent, and inclusive public process to identify public realm improvements and develop programs that address displacement is also reduced. The precedents set with neighborhood-wide rezonings are public charrettes and public outreach that involves hundreds, if not thousands, of people. New York City lists its resulting programs and commitments online with its interactive New York City rezoning commitments tracker. The way we currently handle these private rezoning applications won't be commensurate in participation, transparency, or effectiveness. Environmental analysis for individual ULURP applications is unlikely to identify adverse significant impacts, delays at intersections, overtaxed crosswalks, not enough school seats, the scale of any indirect displacement, since the single applications are too small to be required to study them, never mind address them. Collectively, the rezoning of much of Atlantic Avenue may well produce numerous adverse significant impacts, but they will not be identified and no entity will be held responsible for addressing them. Just as an example, with elementary school seats, Atlantic Yards' environmental analysis shows a shortfall of 1,877 seats, elementary school seats. Who is going to be held responsible for addressing the additional demand these applications are generating that will broaden this shortfall? Without the coordination that a city-led process entails, city agencies will remain siloed, and DCP will have limited ability to marshal city agencies to address infrastructure improvements related to them. The community cannot use piecemeal negotiations with private for-profit developers to address demographic changes in our neighborhood either. Why not wait for a new city council member who has promised to rethink neighborhood-wide rezonings, how neighborhood-wide rezonings are executed, and a new mayor who has signed a letter with an FAR framework and a commitment to a neighborhood-wide plan? Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Our next speaker is Edward Perez, followed by Renzo Ramirez and Jack Robinson.
Today, my name is Edward Perez. Hello? Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Edward Perez. I'm the Senior Monitoring Director at the Big Apple Group. We're a civil engineering solutions firm with over 20 years experience providing geotechnical investigations, materials testing, special inspections, and construction monitoring throughout our lovely city. I would like to comment in favor of this project, but with considerations for the protection of adjacent structures. The demolition of the existing buildings followed by the construction of a new one requiring the excavation of about 300,000 cubic feet of material is quite the operation. Excavation and foundation activities for this project, they're expected to last about 5 months, during which time the adjacent structures like 868 and 890 Atlantic Avenue, just to name a couple, are likely to experience excessive vibration or horizontal and vertical displacement that could lead to structural deficiencies. For a project like this one, the Big Apple Group would recommend a monitoring protocol that includes a pre-existing condition survey of the adjacent structures, as well as optical and vibration monitoring for the protection of the adjacent structures and their tenants. Without getting too specific, our track record includes projects such as 25 Stewart Avenue, 77 Commercial Street, similar in scope. Another one, 625 Fulton Street, which would be the tallest building in Brooklyn once it's completed, all being monitored by state-of-the-art vibration and movement technology. Once supportive excavation activities are completed, our special inspections and materials testing divisions can carry out, other services throughout the life of the project to ensure fast, quality construction. From foundations to welding, Big Apple Group also conducts controlled progress inspections for all phases of construction. By including quality control during the life of the project, we ensure that all work is going to conform to approved construction documents and applicable building code provisions. Anyone interested in having the Big Apple Group conduct monitoring for the protection of adjacent structures on this building, or other civil engineering solutions such as geotechnical investigations or special inspections, that can be reached at 718-767-2900, extension 421. You could also read more about our services at vibrationmonitoring.com. Thank you. That'll be it.
Our next speaker is Renzo Ramirez, followed by Jack Robinson and William Thomas.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes.
All right, I'm just making sure you guys can hear me. All right, cool. Good evening, Borough President Adams. My name is Renzo Ramirez, and I am a member of 32BJ SCIU, here on behalf of the more than 85,000 32BJ members to express our strong support for this project. The developer YNT Development has applied to build a new 15-story mixed-use building. We are pleased to announce that the developer has reached out early to make a credible commitment to provide prevailing wage jobs to the future building service workers at this site. We estimate that this rezoning will allow for the creation of new property service jobs and 42 affordable units. These jobs are typically filled by local members of the community, and because of this commitment, will pay family-sustaining wages, which help bring working families into the middle class. These apartments are needed for working people in Brooklyn. This commitment This commitment to good prevailing wage jobs will give opportunity for upward mobility, security, and dignity for working class families. 32BJ supports responsible developers who invest in the communities where they build. We know that this development will continue to uphold the industry standard and provide opportunities for working families to thrive. Thank you so much for your time.
Our next speaker is Jack Robinson, followed by William Thomas and Nicole Lemler.
Hello, my name is Jack Robinson. I'm a member of the CB8 Land Use Committee. I'm going to read a prepared statement from Elaine Weinstein, who has laryngitis. In Elaine's words, as a member of CB8 Land Use Committee, it was clear by the very close votes on the proposed developments that the neighborhood, that as a neighborhood that we were very conflicted. Given the complexity of the proposals, I feel certain that very few members of the committee fully understood the details of the proposals, and therefore we instead committed to requesting a neighborhood-wide rezoning plan that would reflect the wishes of the broad neighborhood consensus, a broad neighborhood consensus. As you may remember, this neighborhood-wide plan was supported by our current borough president, soon to be our next NYC mayor. To push forward with these, with approval of these private development files in the face of the neighborhood currently congested beyond reason due to Atlantic Yards and Pacific Park. To move ahead with no comprehensive plan to address this important infrastructure needs, such as open space, transportation, and safety, sanitation, and schools, leads us to understand that those voting have not walked the streets, perhaps do not live in proximity of these projects. I have a strong commitment to deeply affordable housing, but also respect the needs of the tenants that will occupy affordable units. They do not have the right to expect a neighborhood that is livable, supportive of their family's needs for light, air, and open space. Why should they have less than other neighborhoods? Thank you for listening, Elaine Weinstein, member CB8, Land Use Committee. If I might comment for the rest of my time, this kind of development is making New York City boring. Next, Mayor Adams, I know that you don't like boring. Help us keep this real neighborhood real and reject both proposals. Thank you.
Okay, we have a few more speakers on this item. Nicole Lemler, followed by Sarah Lazar and Karen. I don't have a last name.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Lemler. I live at 1022 Pacific Street. I've lived here for the past 20 years. Much of our neighborhood is zoned commercial and industrial, and I understand that this is not zoned correctly for what's needed. I get that we need more housing and our neighborhood is going to change. New York City is clearly not for the nostalgic, but the holistic vision of change is missing from these two rezoning applications. The proposals before you are haphazard and lack the context and cohesiveness that our real beautiful Brooklyn neighborhood deserves. The developers and their lawyers seem to be the ones that succeed in the process. I'm a member of CB8 Land Use Committee, NU1. It's been a challenge couple of months, but we care, and that's why we are all here. Though my recent interactions with our Land Use Committee have seemed tainted and the decisions have seemed unrepresentative of the community's actual opinion. As a committee member, I think I should amplify my neighbors' voices, concerns about the rent safety, the traffic on Atlantic Avenue, infrastructure, community. We've all known each other for years, and more are disappearing. We have an absolutely undefined number of units, people, materials pumped into our community without a cohesive neighborhood plan. I urge you to reject these two projects in favor of a comprehensive neighborhood plan. As a member of the Land Use Committee of CB8, the process has been excessively procedurally difficult. The two proposals before you have passed CB8 land use with the slimmest of margins. There is no clear neighborhood consensus. Please reject these proposals. We want development, but a planned development that keeps neighborhood, its people, and infrastructure in mind. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
I apologize, we skipped over William Thomas. He is our next speaker.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for having me tonight. Hello, my name is Will Thomas. I'm here to support the project as a representative of Open New York. We're an independent grassroots pro-housing organization. We support 870, 888 Atlantic because allowing more homes here would both help to alleviate New York's housing shortage, but also help to fight displacement in other neighborhoods. So I believe everyone knows that on some level, New York has a terrible housing shortage. But let me throw out some numbers to remind everyone how bad it is. Right now, New Yorkers are facing rent increases of up to 50, 60, 70% as rent discounts offered during the pandemic expire. Homelessness is at the highest rate since the Great Depression. There are over 14,000 children who sleep in city shelters each and every night. The 69 affordable homes that this rezoning would provide are desperately needed. That said, allowing more market rate homes here in an objectively wealthy enclave of the city will also help by preventing displacement elsewhere. The census tract for the rezoning area has a median household income of well over 6 figures. Prospect Heights is a wealthy, desirable neighborhood, and although it will likely be many families' first choice, if they can't find a place to live here, they will move to a more affordable neighborhood. As displaced demand increases in those neighborhoods, up goes the rent, which forces current tenants to allocate ever larger shares of their income to stay in their homes and knocks those who can't pay to the street. If we don't let young professionals live here, they're not going to disappear. They're going to continue to gentrify neighborhoods further out in Brooklyn, like Crown Heights, Flatbush, and Brownsville. By contrast, every new home here will spare a family that pressure, which is nothing to laugh at. All that said, this project does include too much parking. There's widespread academic agreement that parking requirements raise the cost of housing, lock us into auto dependency, and take up space that could otherwise go to affordable housing or retail. I would ask the Borough President to push for all parking to be waived from the project entirely. Lastly, I would note that this project has already been downsized since its initial submission. Borough President Adams ran explicitly on a platform of upzoning wealthy neighborhoods for mixed income housing. This is an opportunity to put his platform into action and demand the full-size original proposal be equally considered. I hope we all agree that we should maximize the opportunity for affordable housing on this site. To put it bluntly, we live in a city where there aren't enough homes for the people who want to live here, which has horrifying human consequences. That's the terrible shadow of the neighborhood, the quality of life issue to address. I would especially ask the Borough President to prioritize solutions there over anyone's aesthetic concerns. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sarah Lazar.
Hi there. Yes, I'm a member of Community Board 8, but I'm changing hats tonight, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Crown Heights Tenant Union tonight. The CHTU has voted unanimously to recommend that the Borough President, the CPC, and the incoming council member reject all private rezoning applications along Atlantic Avenue under the current regime of ULURP and MIH. These applications, as well as the inevitable future ones, will all directly or indirectly displace tenants, and this is unacceptable. From our founding, CHTU has opposed schemes like MIH that use the promise of affordable housing, quote unquote, in order to push forward rezonings that incentivize the cycle of displacement and overcharge that we have been fighting throughout Crown Heights and beyond. Our members know from direct experience that when a speculative investor buys land in our neighborhood with the intention to rezone it and build luxury housing, our landlords see the likely influx of wealthy people next door, and they calculate that rents in their own property should increase as well. As was the case with 840 Atlantic and every MIH rezoning in our area, developers wave a handful of affordable units in our faces and simulate haggling over the MIH option, all so that the community can emerge from the negotiation feeling like they won something. But this sleight of hand is always there to obscure what the developers never trade away, the square feet of unaffordable housing that will be added, which always remains the same or larger by the end of the negotiation, and which determines the real impact of a development on the neighborhood. The current leadership at DCP also uses a second sleight of hand trick, making displacement risk invisible. Instead of undertaking the task of real city planning, their job ostensibly, which would require really evaluating the impact of upzoning Atlantic Avenue all at once to about 20 stories from Vanderbilt all the way to the men's homeless shelter at the Bedford Atlantic Armory. DCP has encouraged these developers to apply individually so that each individual proposal's impact on the neighborhood appears relatively small and doesn't cross the threshold past which the city would have to take action to mitigate these impacts. This sleight of hand only works, however, when all the parties choose to play along, when the people with a seat at the table turn a blind eye to displacement. We know that community plans have a terrible track record of surviving DCP, but we also know that leaving planning up to a few unelected people behind closed doors has been an abject disaster. When we are on the cusp of a new administration, it would be a terrible idea to bet the whole neighborhood, especially tenants who are hanging on by a thread, on the failed strategies of the last decade. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Karen, followed by Kaya Kul.
Can't unmute. Oh, hi. I don't have anything prepared. So I live right behind the development, and there's 3 lots that literally are 30 feet away from the lot line. So not like the other small houses here. So we're a lot closer to this development. So just hearing everything, including what Edward said, I mean, he's
Karen, if
worried
you could give your
about
full name, please.
vibrations. Kadir, he's worried about vibrations across Atlantic Avenue. We're right up next against it, and I've brought this up many times about our lot line and being right over the LIRR. I mean, I just don't feel comfortable with such a tall building. I mean, I'm not sure what it's going to do to our property. And also from listening, we're only like 3 stories tall, and this building is going to be like 15 stories tall right in the backyard. I mean, it's not a matter of the shadows, but we're not going to have a lot of light for most of the time. Even the detention center on Atlantic Avenue, I mean, that has more light now if you put up this building. So I really don't understand. And I think Nick had mentioned something about the properties being a blight. I mean, I've lived here over 40 something years in the same place. And, those were primarily Black owned businesses. Where you saw the McDonald's, that used to be tire shops. So, what's considered a blight? The neighborhood is changing, and you are displacing minorities, and I've seen it, right? Even though you have affordable housing, right? People just can't afford to live in the neighborhood. Yes, you're giving them rent, but everything else is very unaffordable. And I just think it has no like real impact on what you're doing. You're not doing anything for the community. You're just doing approving a building with no real insight. And then the comment about parking, I mean, we live here. Parking is something that you get the place by like Barclay Center. It's a concern. I mean, I just don't understand.
Karen, again, if you give us your full name, please.
Karen Kadir.
Okay, our next speaker is Kaya Kul,
Good
followed by
evening.
Jordan Kramer.
Sorry. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kaya Kuhlen. I'm an urban planner. I specialize in community engagement. I also live on Pacific Street between Vanderbilt and Underhill, just a few houses down from Karen. I urge the Borough President, the City Planning Commission, and the City Council to reject this application before you in favor of a comprehensive planning process for Atlantic Avenue. I've been spending the past several weeks speaking with my neighbors about this proposal. Many have lived, as Karen just said, on this block for decades. Some others are new, like me. And I've listened to their concerns, and at times I tried to explain this process. ULURP, the word itself, is difficult and complex and broken, as we all know. And our opinions about what would be appropriate on these sites are not necessarily unified. I heard everything from 6 stories to 12 stories, but we are unanimous in our thinking that the proposed 15-story building is unprecedented and high for a mid-block opposite 3 to 4-story townhouses. That is. And we would like to have a meaningful opportunity to share our opinions, and that happens through a comprehensive planning process where we have public meetings and we can all get together and exchange what would be the best and value the expertise of both those who are local and the expertise of those who are planners and designers and land use specialists. So I really would like to see a comprehensive plan. We think a safer Atlantic Avenue is critical. I would like to remind everyone here also that the north side of our block on Pacific, where we live, is zoned for PS 11 and Clinton Hill. So small children have to cross Atlantic Avenue, 120 feet of traffic that is currently dangerous and hostile. And we don't see that individual private applications can deliver this additional benefit that a comprehensive planning process could, to look at how we can improve the neighborhood as a whole. We see our hardware store displaced, our infrastructure crumbling, our basements filling with water, and yet 4 EASs of the 4 proposals that are going through ULURP right now at sort of the last minute of this administration, together probably more than 1,000 pages of planning jargon, adding 3,000 people to the neighborhood, and none of them have found any impact whatsoever. And I think we're just asking for a simple thing, that you do not move ahead with these projects at the very last hour and let a new administration plan together with us a long-term future for Atlantic Avenue and for everyone. Thank you.
Okay, our last speaker at this time is Jordan Kramer.
Figure out how to unmute myself. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? And I hope you can see me as well. My name is Jordan Kramer. I'm sorry, I've got my son here, Julian. Not right now. Kiddo. I'm a resident. I live on Pacific. Hold on one sec. Julian, please. Got my 8-year-old here, which is actually something.
It's fine.
No, it's something in fact I'm going to mention. So I'm a resident. I live on Pacific, but I'm also an anthropologist, and I've been researching neighborhood and community organizing for the past year during the pandemic. And I have serious concerns about both this project and this process. So first of all, I'd like to urge the Borough President and the community and the City Council to reject these individual proposals for all the reasons that Kaya, Peter, and many others tonight have identified in favor of a comprehensive comprehensive rezoning process. It's one of the major things that became clear during my research that is necessary to develop neighborhoods in a responsible way. I also found in my research that these kinds of the shift to online is increasingly excluding many of the people who live here and who are affected by these developments. You'll note that many of the residents who will be displaced are not on this call. That's a huge problem with how this process has unfolded. I also want to note that these kinds of individual plans will not solve the massive housing crisis we have in New York. I'm deeply in favor of affordable housing and expanding housing. But this kind of individual rezoning is not the way to solve it. And I have two other points. One is to say that yes, Prospect Heights has become a well-off neighborhood, but it is still in the process of gentrifying. And I promise that many low-income families, the historically West Indian and Puerto Rican families that have lived here, they are still here. And many more people will be displaced by this kind of upzoning. And lastly, I'd like to point out that the drawing the developer showed the building in the context of the homes on Pacific Street was misleading. It showed the maximum envelope, but most of the existing homes are much smaller. So I'm in one of these little houses that's right behind the proposed development. This development would dwarf our block and all of the houses along Pacific. It's completely out of proportion with the neighborhood. I think that those are all of my points. So thank you very much.
I would ask the Borough President whether or not I may make three small statements in response to some of the comments that were made.
Richard, you could email us any statement you'd like to make, and we'll have that for the record. But we can go dialogue tonight.
Thank you, Richard.
Seeing no further requests to speak, I suggest that we move on to the next application.
Okay, Richard, could you close this item?
Calendar item 1 is closed. Calendar item number 2, 1034 through 1042 Atlantic Avenue, which also includes Pacific Street, 210386 ZMK, 210387 ZRK, 210379 ZSK.
These applications submitted by EMP Capital Group pursuant to sections 197C and 201 of the New York City Charter for the following land use actions. A zoning map amendment to change the eastern 315 feet of a block fronting Classen Avenue between Atlantic Avenue and Pacific Street from M1-1 to C6-3A district along Atlantic and R7A/C24 district along Pacific in Community District 8. A zoning text amendment to designate an MIH area coterminous with this 315-foot section of the block, mapped with options 1 and 2. A zoning text amendment to modify zoning resolution sections 35-66 to permit a minimum of 20-foot sidewalk on Atlantic Avenue, and a special permit pursuant to section 74-533 to reduce the accessory parking requirement. The requested actions would facilitate a 17-story mixed residential, commercial, and community facility building with 210 dwelling units, of which 52 would be targeted to 60% of area median income, or 63 would be targeted to 80% of area median income. The development would provide approximately 11,900 square feet of commercial space and a 2,580 square foot youth center. The seller would contain 20 accessory parking spaces. Community Board 8 disapproved this application with conditions on November 10th, 2021. Just want to remind viewers who wish to testify that you must enter your name in the WebEx chat, send it to all panelists, and state intent to speak on the application. After the presentation and question and answer portion, we'll call speakers in the order of chat requests. Would Richard Lobel, the representative for this application, please state your name for the record and present the application.
Richard Lobel of Sheldon Lobel PC for the applicant. Good evening again. So as the application is loaded, I will note that the applicant team is here and available to answer questions. Once again, Richard Lobel. I'm joined by Eli Pariente, the applicant for the 1034 to 1042 Atlantic Avenue rezoning, as well as Nick Liberis, the project architect, and Kevin Williams of Equity Environmental. So obviously, there's been much discussion with regards to this rezoning from an M11 to a C63A zoning district on the portion bounded by Atlantic and Classen 100 feet back, as well as the R7A portion of the district, R7A-C24, bounded by Classen and Pacific Streets. I will note to begin with that the community board voted in favor of the resolutions around this by a vote of 22 to 10, more than 2 to 1 in favor. So while many have discussions with regards to how close the vote was, the truth was that the applicants here presented a building and a project which has garnered much support in the community. Ellie himself is a developer who has brought projects before the community board previously in the form of the Grand Pacific rezoning, and has developed a long relationship of trust and moving forward in that regard. So again, to recap the actions prior to Nick discussing the area context and the plans, this is for a zoning map amendment to change the existing M11 to C63A and R7A C24 districts. The majority of the lot area would be located within the C63A portion, which with a roughly 28,000 square foot portion located within the R7A. There would be that's incorrect. The total floor area of 27,000 square feet in the R7A. There would be a text amendment to Appendix F to allow for a mandatory inclusionary housing district as originally proposed with options 1 and 2, although that will be further discussed. There would be a text amendment, again, to require this 20-foot wide sidewalk in front of the building along Atlantic, and a special permit with regards to 74533 to reduce the required parking. With that, I would allow Nick to speak. Of course, Ellie is always deeply engaged with all these presentations, so he will likely speak as well. And then to the extent there's additional land use comments, we would add those at the end. So Nick, can you please continue?
Thanks, Rich. Yes, please advance these slides. So this is in the same general area as the last application. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The original proposed building was 17 stories tall. We employed a series of setbacks to have some nice terraces facing the street. There was a bunch of muraling proposed for the side of it. For the upper portion, up above the base, we had set back 8 feet from the side lot line in a way to introduce balconies to enliven this facade, because we had anticipated that there wasn't going to be development next to this lot for some time. So we thought that we would take some pains to make it something that looked nice as an object in the round, both from this side, next slide, and also from the opposite side over here. We employed the same strategy. There's an 8-foot setback on this side as well. There was always an intent to use muraling. So Ellie he has a vision for this area that's very much akin to certain mural districts in Florida and in Europe. Next slide, please. This is the front elevation of the 17-story project. Next slide, please. This was a part of the building that was proposed to engage the sidewalk. The sidewalks, as we had discussed before, have been proposed to be 20 feet deep. This building feature here was an urban living room where we had given it another 10 feet to the sidewalk. And there was a double height space over here, which was proposed to be a community center geared towards youth sport. Next slide, please. This is a view of the Atlantic Avenue corridor over here. To the right is the Pacific Grand project, where the muraling effort is visible on the right side of the building, and then you can see it in situ with these other murals that have been proposed on the Pacific side of this project to the back on the left-hand side, and on the Atlantic side. Next slide, please. This is the view from Pacific Street. Next slide, please. Also the view from Pacific Street. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the site itself is 120 feet deep, which is atypical. This portion in the back is part of the front lot, and what this lets us do is blend the floor area across the two lots in a way that overall reduces the impacts of the site. It's a very unique and welcome configuration for the site, because it lets us keep things more spread out and low. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This was the first unit breakdown, where we had 193 dwelling units maximum, and then we had projected 174 in the back, in the front, excuse me, and then 36 in the back, for a total of 210. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next, so this was the ground floor where we had proposed that the double height space, and then you can see there's a little bit of parking in the cellar. The double height space was open to the cellar floor where there was a 10,000 square foot plus community facility. Next slide, please. If you could just advance through these next few slides that are all plans. Thank you. This is an elevation view of the front building on Atlantic, showing the 174 units and how they get distributed floor by floor. Next slide, please. The same for the Pacific building, so 36 units, and the distribution over the 9 floors. There's 210 units total in this proposal. Next slide, please. This is a repeat of the picture, just to show you what we had tweaked here. So this is 17 floors. If you go to the next slide, this is a pretty similar design at 15 floors. Next slide, please. So this was the first proposal, 17 floors, 210 units with option 2. Next slide, please. The amended proposal was also C638 8.5 FAR, but it's also been lowered, and this is a section through both buildings where we have the same overhang that was shown in the last application. However, because of that excessively deep backyard in the area where the Pacific Street mass is not, we could thicken the building in a way which makes this lower height very, very feasible. We have gone down to 192 units, which is a net loss of about 18 units. And now the MIH proposes option 3. Next slide, please. This is the breakdown of these affordable units, 45 total, 16 one-bed, 11 two-bed, 9 three-bed, and 9 studio. Next slide, please. This was the amended proposal. The double height space has been taken out by request. We have retail space and 30% of the ground floor for M Crown, which is about 5,400 square feet on this with this amount of retail. You could see that the residential lobby to the right takes out some of the floor area. The ramp going down takes out some of the floor area. There's a residential lobby to the plan south and at the bottom of the page here, over by Pacific Street, where it says Pacific Street here, and that's all stuff which is not retail, and as such, it doesn't count towards that total, but the 30% of that has been calculated out of for the end crown. Next slide, please. These are some of the studies where we were looking at how visible the buildings from Atlantic with a proposed height of 15 or 17 stories would be in the event that an R7A at 95 feet is permitted, as it has been for 1010 and 1050. This is the effect of how the view, the pedestrian view would be occluded, and you wouldn't see the stuff on the backside of the block, in this case on Atlantic. So you can see here that what we've done is we've placed the subject all the way up against the opposite side of the street, with his back placed up against the wall of the building, and even in this condition, in the widest part of the sidewalk that we had measured when we went out there, it's impossible to see the buildings on Atlantic. Next slide, please. This would be the more typical condition where you have 3, 4, 5 story buildings, but with that same condition with the subject and their back up against the wall up across the street, you would maybe see about a foot of that building on the backside of the block. And at that distance, it's almost invisible. Next slide, please. This would be the view from that same vantage point with the shorter building, and you can see here that with the R7A bulk, it's clear that it would just completely block the 155-foot building on Atlantic. Next slide, please. And these are some of the sustainable building measures that we had discussed before. The general philosophy is the same. And next slide, please. I think that's it. With that, my presentation concludes. Thank you.
So with that, we would note to the Borough President's office that Kevin Williams is additionally here, who is part of the applicant team and is the environmental consultant from Equity Environmental. As with all other rezoning applications, a detailed environmental assessment was produced looking at over 25 different impact categories, and a negative declaration was issued by the Environmental Assessment and Review Division at City Planning. So, we're happy to answer the comments on a going forward basis. We do note that as with most of these applications, and particularly this application, City Planning was from the beginning an advocate of R9A zoning here. This was not, or specifically C63A. This was not something which the applicant created on their own. There was a solid land use rationale, which has since that date been supported by City Planning at every public meeting and hearing. We understand, of course, given the community board resolutions and other statements, that a neighborhood-wide rezoning is desired. And we would simply note, prior to proceeding to questions, that the applicant has been at this for over 3 years, and that the 2015 M-Crown resolutions are well known to the applicant. Yet, despite that, we still remain after 6 now to 7 years time with no area-wide rezoning. This is it's a challenging environment in which to obtain an area-wide rezoning. We note with the publicly available information regarding city planning and staffing of that agency. While some choose to belittle the agency at this hearing, we know that they do good work on behalf of the city, and particularly the Brooklyn office on behalf of Brooklyn. So, with that, we're happy to answer any specific questions about the application.
Great, thank you. Some of these you've addressed, but let me get them into the record as well. Given Community Board 8's general M-Crown position regarding envisioned use, height, and density along Atlantic Avenue and its adopted resolution for this section of the block, as well as its recommendations adopted on November 10th, one, why should this proposal, which exceeds the expressed height and density along Atlantic Avenue by 20%, exceeds residential floor by more than 50,000 square feet, and proposes about 35,000 square feet less non-residential floor area be supported? And two, to what extent is the applicant willing to make further modifications?
So, of course, and thank you for the question, we generally recognize, again, Atlantic Avenue here being 120 feet wide, being a centerpiece with regards to transportation in the area, as well as the underutilized M11 nature of the current sites. First of all, the numbers, the square footages are somewhat skewed. As far as how much the proposal exceeds the square footage, we believe that it's actually, particularly in light of the adjustments to the square footage, now less than 25,000 square feet. But regardless of that, and regardless of if we exceeded that at all, the issue here is that the applicant has made major concessions with regards to the application. It was recognized at the community board that the M-Crown floor area offered at the site is, as a percentage, over 200% greater than what would otherwise be required, and affordability levels, both in terms of just immediate income as well as rents, are reduced by more than 30%. Simply put, this allows for close to 50 affordable units and ones at deep affordability to get on the market years earlier than would otherwise be available were an area-wide rezoning pursued, or were the applicant merely to wait and not engage in any rezoning. So, with that, we would also note that, again, AMIs here go to very meaningful levels in accordance with the application. And so, we feel that this is a more than adequate trade-off for the overages requested as far as the rezoning. Ellie, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
I would love to answer any questions, but as you said, Rich, we've drafted this newly updated presentation based on the express comments of the community board, the 3 major concessions that Rich just mentioned, the height going down from 17 to 15 stories, the Jeep affordability option 3 MIH, which is rather unusual and quite difficult to produce. And the M-Crown uses on the ground floor, which represent 30% of the Atlantic Avenue square footage. And yeah, as Rich said, the overall FAR for the total project is around 6.9. And there was a very comprehensive study that was presented by the Community Board 8, and the overall square footage really ends up just being a little north of 20,000 above the original density envisioned by the M Crown. With that, as always, happy to answer any questions.
So you're not actually giving yourself credit for the cellar space that you're providing as well, that I guess you had mentioned might be community use as well. So you're certainly welcome to take credit for that cellar space, but the residential reduction from 60% AMI to 40%, you're really not giving anything by dropping that because you're getting all this extra market rate floor area. So I don't see how you see going from 60% AMI to 40% as a give back because you're getting all this extra market rate floor area.
So that, I mean, that's an equation that I would love to explain, but the option 3, going from 25% to 20%, the delta in rents between the option 1 and option 3 is really, really significant. I think the chart that Nick or Rich presented show that you literally go from $600 a month for 1 bedroom to $1,800, $1,900 on option 1 or option 2. So overall, it does have a major impact, and not even forgetting that under the current 421A and what most likely will be the next 421A, we would be required to deliver 25% anyway. So on top of the option 3 MIH that we're building, we would still need to produce an additional 5% of affordable units. Whereas, so when you do option 1, you're already taken care of because you're already delivering the 25% required. When you do option 3, you have to comply with both MIH and the additional 5% for 421A. But we're happy to supply.
And what AMI would that additional 5% be?
Well, on the current 421A, which again, this wouldn't really apply because we don't know whether, this expires in June, so this is obviously not going to qualify by then. But under the current 421A, it will be a mix between 100% to 130% AMI.
And some people out here think 130% AMI is pretty close to market rate. For some units.
That's
and again, when you say you're not collecting 60% AMI rents for some units, again, you're allowed to have market rate. So your rent is also that increased amount of money you'd be collecting from a market rate unit instead of affordable. So I'm not sure you've convinced that doing 4% AMI is not neutral.
I'm happy to share the pro forma, but I'll be happy to show you the delta in rent, and that's certainly an
Appreciate learning.
I can add to the presentation if needed.
Yeah, I also just want to note here that there's a dramatic increase in the availability of M Crown floor area on the site. This was noted at over 240% by the community board, as well as further restrictions beyond even what was restricted in prior applications along Pacific and Grand to the uses as had been recorded in the record 7B, 8B, 9A, 11, 16A, 16D, 17B, and 18A. So again, keeping in mind the fact that we're doing a project and not merely thinking about a rezoning, taken in the totality, this is something which again was one of the options that was approved at the community board in their resolutions, and importantly, offers good quality jobs in addition to the affordable units. So again, we're looking at the totality of the application, not merely the residential piece.
Great, thank you. Regarding the requested elimination of the 48 required parking spaces, given the significant cost reduction for the developer, to what extent is the project providing additional public benefit beyond the required MIH floor area?
Sure, and again, without belaboring this, I offer the services of Kevin Williams, who's on the phone from Equity Environmental, who did detailed parking studies in this. We would note again that city planning in many of these applications, including this application, is supportive of a parking waiver here, as meeting the findings as required by the special permit. But I think more importantly, the parking spaces that were requested here to be waived have again been part of the application, have been part of the pro forma and the applicant's discussion in the entirety of the application that has not changed throughout the initial application filing through ULURP review. So, while admittedly it is a cost savings to reduce your parking, here, given the fact that we meet the carefully meet the special findings of the permit, as well as the fact that there are other concessions offered in terms of M-Crown floor area, restrictions on uses, and deeper affordability, we feel that the totality of the project still speaks for itself, and that it more than justifies the reduction in parking.
And regarding the intended affordable housing units, what are the qualifying income range for prospective households based on size, and what are the anticipated rents based on bedrooms, and what are the distribution of units by bedroom size?
Yes, so I think again, Nick had provided a summary sheet in the materials. While we review that summary sheet, which includes AMIs, I'll note that the adjusted affordable monthly rents for the project as proposed and as revised. So here we have in front of us the rents for these units, again, reaching very deep affordability, particularly in light of not merely 40% on average, but to go as deep as 30% here. So really getting deep affordability, getting a nice mix of unit sizes, which again, by MIH standards must mirror the units within the development as a whole. This is not something which we take lightly at all. This is, the creation not only of deep affordability with studios at $419 and with AMIs reaching to $25,000, but this is also the availability of larger units to individuals and families in the community who may not otherwise have access to that. Well, so while some would, again, take the opportunity to belittle the affordability in the project, the truth of the matter is that, we're creating units here, we're creating larger units for families, we're creating affordability. This is something which was a centerpiece of the discussion of the community board. And so we're very proud of the income levels and rents that are achieved in this project. But the numbers are in front of you as well as the bedroom.
Thank you. And another familiar question. Could you identify what marketing strategies, such as designating one of the community's affordable housing nonprofits as the affordable housing administering agent, would be used in the tenant selection process to ensure the highest level of participation from Community District 8, particularly those that are rent burdened or at risk of displacement? And would such a marketing strategy start off with a financial literacy campaign to assist area residents in becoming lottery eligible?
And so again, this discussion reflects our prior conversation. I do know that LA has reached out independently to administering agents who have been cited before the Brooklyn Borough President and has had conversations with those agents, administering agents. And again, the discussion was around financial literacy, and in particular to add that there is a current preference of 50% of these units in favor of residents of Community Board 8. So this administering agent, which is a local Brooklyn-based administering agent, would be targeting individuals in the area with these units and to allow them for full knowledge of the lottery as well as the opportunity to financially qualify for such units. So we're really looking forward to that. We're really excited to finalizing an agreement with our administering agent, and that will, again, the financial literacy portion will be a centerpiece of the campaign.
Should we mention who the administering agent is, or is the company that we're talking to, or no need?
Yeah, no. So as a matter of disclosure, I know that LA has spoken to Impact Brooklyn, which is an organization which is very familiar to the Brooklyn Borough President's office.
Thank you. The applicant has expressed intent to reserve 2,580 square feet of community facility space for a youth center. What mechanism would guarantee such a commitment as a public benefit for the proposed rezoning?
Yes, so I'm going to weigh in, and then I would invite Ellie to discuss this as well at his discretion. The community center was a centerpiece of the proposal at the original R9A height and bulk. Since that time, there have been further discussions, particularly around a restriction on the non-residential floor area and M-Crown uses. So, while there were other discussions around M-Crown uses, including certain community facility uses, they are not so included in this iteration, particularly in the most recently approved community board resolutions on November 10th. So, Ellie, do you have anything else to add?
At the risk of sounding like an attorney, no offense, Rich, I would say that the mechanism that we intend on using is, filing a restrictive declaration and a CBA on title that would prevent us from using the space for any other use. Whether we end up committing to, as Rich said, the community board's request and recommendation was to actually increase the size of that center and have narrowed the use groups to more industrial uses at the request of the community board. But whatever ends up being the use, we will ensure the restricted use through a restrictive declaration and a community benefits agreement. Thank you.
And because you showed on the presentation a larger square footage, but then also the seller, it seems to have square footage. Is that also some of the square footage that you're looking at, even though it's not zoning square footage? Are you looking to have that as part of this potential restrictive deck?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the type of uses. The biggest use for the retail space was when it was going to be a youth center. We expected the need to have a double height ceiling. If it ends up being more of a light industrial use, I don't know that this will be required as much. But that it wasn't expressed by the community board as that much of a requirement. But if we have to, yes, we'll add the basement into the restrictive deck.
Okay, so right now the basement we should consider as a more likely retail use group.
I'm not quite sure because this was amended just a week ago at the request of the community board. We haven't discussed the basement, to tell the truth. So I guess for now we can.
Well, in the next week or two or three, because Borough Presidents not needed to make a decision so quickly. If you want to update with your thoughts on the seller in terms of what might be leaning towards M-Crown type uses instead of retail or office uses.
Okay, I'll certainly
or medical. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's Borough President's policy to promote the use of renewable energy, focused on advancing a sustainable future in Brooklyn. It's also his policy to promote practices to retain stormwater runoff. What consideration has been given, possibly in cooperation with the DEP, the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, NYSERDA, or NYPA, to incorporating passive house design, blue, green, or white roof covering, solar roof and/or facade panels, roof-mounted microgrid batteries, wind turbines, and/or DEP curbside rain gardens?
So again, I would request perhaps that the page with such sustainability measures be posted, and with a request that Nick Lemler similarly speak on this matter.
I think that page pretty succinctly summarizes everything. So I would refer to the page if that could be made part of the public record. I think that has all the answers.
Okay.
Thank you.
And my final question, it's Borough
Well,
President.
actually, can you be explicit in terms of the rain gardens, because I don't believe that was on your final page.
Oh, that's right.
And the sidewalk realm.
Yes, I think we would be taking the same measures over here as we had described for 880.
You good, Richard?
Sure.
All right. So it's the Borough President's policy to maximize quality jobs for Brooklynites. Could you outline what steps will be taken to ensure the inclusion and participation of minority and women-owned business enterprises and/or local business enterprises in the construction process?
Sure, thank you. So again, not speaking for 32BJ, who I understand still has a representative in the hearing, but the applicant has reached agreement with 32BJ. So with regards to union jobs, we are very much looking forward to having them be an integral part of the project moving forward. So that would be our discussion with regards to union jobs. And then, similarly with regards to LCE and MBWE jobs, we would also refer to the opportunity previously for 421A relief and currently for whatever program may hopefully replace that program, and would at a minimum agree with those guidelines. I would also add, as I sometimes like to discuss, that when you take underutilized sites and fill them with active uses, not only residential, but also commercial and community facility, there is a job generation which takes place merely by the commercial activity to take place at the site. And here, importantly, much of that commercial activity will be in the form of M-Crown uses specifically designed for generating high quality commercial jobs. So in addition to all the discussion around LCE and MBWE, as is the practice of the Borough President's Office, we also note that we will be creating other jobs here in the form of commercial and not merely retail, but also M-Crown jobs, which, as has been highlighted in the community board's resolutions dating back for now close to 7 years, an important part and parcel of community development.
Thank you. I just want a final reminder to viewers who wish to testify that you must enter your name into the WebEx chat and send it to all panelists and state your intent to speak on the application. Ina, do we have any speakers signed up?
We had certain speakers who wanted to testify in both applications, so I'm going to refer back to Gib Vacconi and Peter Crashes.
Thank you very much. This is Gib Vacconi. Again, I'm going to be speaking on behalf of Community Board 8. Similar to the 870 Atlantic application, the Community Board recommended denial of support for 1034 Atlantic in favor of a neighborhood-wide rezoning in accordance with the board's M-Crown resolutions from 2015, 2016, and 2019. Because this is an unusual situation with a new city council member taking office before the end of ULURP and a new administration taking office before the end of ULURP, the community board did outline a number of scenarios that it would be interested in having other participants in the ULURP process consider in the event a neighborhood rezoning is judged to be not possible. The first is that the applicant remove lots 29, 33, and 40 from its application and file a zoning text amendment to create a contextual variation of the existing C61 zoning district with required non-residential frontage consistent with the regulations of the Special Enhanced Commercial District with base FAR of 6 and incentive FAR of 1 for non-residential use. Again, this would establish the zoning tool that is called out in the Community Board's M-Crown resolutions for Atlantic Avenue. If that is not possible, the Community Board has asked that Lot 40 be removed from the application, that all lots be mapped MIH options 1 and 3, and that the applicant make the final binding commitments, the following final binding commitments. First, to restrict the use of a minimum of 5,400 square feet to floor areas to use groups 7B, 8B, 9A, 11, 16A, 16D, 17B, and 18A. Second, to offer required affordable apartments under MIH option 3. Third, to limit total FAR to 7.2. And fourth, to limit the building height fronting Atlantic Avenue to 15 stories. If all of that is not possible, the Community Board recommends that Lot 40 be removed from the application and the applicant make a binding commitment subject to the establishment of C62A zoning in lieu of the proposed C63A zoning to restrict residential use on lots 29 and 33 to 5.2 FAR. If that is not possible, the Community Board asks that Lot 40 be removed from the application and Lot 29 and a portion of Lot 33 fronting Atlantic Avenue be rezoned C45D. Thanks very much for the opportunity to testify. Before I go, I do want to address just a couple comments that were made about neighborhood-wide rezoning in the last application and may come up again. The first has to do with public engagement. Here I would like to point out that the Community Board has been pursuing a neighborhood rezoning through its M-Crown initiative since 2015. More than 220 people have attended the M-Crown meetings over those years, so that there has been a significant amount of community input that has driven that process so far. And then I would also like to point out that a neighborhood-wide rezoning would involve likely significant additional density along Atlantic Avenue. The neighborhood-wide rezoning would be led by the Department of City Planning, which has advised the applicants in these cases as well. So it does have potential challenges, even though, as I say, if the Community Board is interested in seeing that completed in accordance with its resolutions. Thanks very much for the opportunity to testify.
So our next speaker again is Peter Crash.
Hi, thanks. I found the camera this time around. I'm going to reread the statement from the North Prospect Heights Association. We are deeply concerned by the emergence of individual private ULURP applications for Atlantic Avenue, and we call on Borough President Adams to reject them. We continue to support the longstanding but clearly challenged commitment of the Borough President, Majority Leader Combo, and Brooklyn Community Board 8 for a community-led neighborhood-wide rezoning of the northern parts of Prospect Heights and Crown Heights. The use of individual private applications to unlock development potential on Atlantic Avenue undercuts the community's leverage to develop a holistic plan that addresses, with the 6,450 new units of housing already approved for Atlantic Yards Pacific Park, the implications of an eventual near doubling of Prospect Heights population by new development on public infrastructure. It further fails to address the implications of indirect displacement caused by the introduction of such a large number of new market rate units. These proposals should be rejected. We ask our city council member and mayor to work with us to deliver a better plan. I will then continue on with my own statement here. I'm alarmed that what's unfolding here is the development of a neighborhood based on a menu of items for profit developers volunteer to chef for us. We're going to be letting city agencies and our elected officials off the hook, and we'll leave the community with changes that may contradict declared goals. While imperfect, neighborhood-wide plans have far broader scope, including programs and funding for displacement mitigation and infrastructure improvements. These are benefits that individual applications cannot deliver. The greater density ushered in by these individual applications increases adverse impacts on the community, while at the same time, the piecemeal way the new zoning districts are being constructed ironically takes away the community's leverage to meaningfully address adverse impacts. Just as importantly, the wider community's ability to participate in a timely, transparent, and inclusive public process to identify public realm improvements and develop any programs to address displacement is also reduced. The precedent set with neighborhood-wide rezonings are public charrettes, which is a participatory planning process that's not sent out by it's not a subcommittee of the Land Use Committee of Community Board 8, which doesn't has to struggle advertising its meetings. New York City lists its resulting programs and commitments online with its interactive New York City rezoning commitments tracker. The way we currently handle these private rezoning applications won't be commensurate in participation, transparency, or effectiveness. Environmental analysis for individual ULURP applications is unlikely to identify adverse significant impacts, delays at intersections, overtaxed crosswalks, not enough school seats, the scale of any indirect displacement. Since the single applications are too small to be required to study them, never mind address them. Collectively, the rezoning of much of Atlantic Avenue may well produce numerous adverse significant impacts, but they will not be identified and no entity will be held responsible for addressing them. Just as an example, with elementary school seats, Atlantic Yards environmental analysis shows a shortfall of 1,877 seats. Who's going to be held responsible for addressing the additional demand these applications are generating that will broaden this shortfall? The community cannot use piecemeal negotiations with for-profit developers to address demographic changes in our neighborhood either. Without the coordination that a city-led process entails, city agencies will remain siloed, and DCP will have limited ability to marshal city agencies to address infrastructure improvements related to individual rezonings. Why not wait for a new council member who has promised to rethink how neighborhood-wide rezonings are executed, and a new mayor who has signed a letter with an FER framework and a commitment to a neighborhood-wide plan? And may I just want to add one other thing, because I just want to make a note of something. So if we were actually meeting in person, we'd be in Borough Hall. And the first time that I met Mr. Barak was at a meeting in Borough Hall, to my recollection, in 2004, about Atlantic Yards. And at that meeting, we had an attorney from the Empire State Development there. And we asked each community member, there's about, I'd say 30, 40 community neighborhood representatives from neighborhood associations there. We're allowed to ask one question. My question was, how are the decisions about the plan going to be made? Like what kind of oversight is there going to be? Was what was inferred, and the attorney from ESD went, Just like that. That was the answer. And I think that what we're dealing with still, and this is maybe a state project with Empire State Development, but it is within the city of New York. The city has always had the capacity to address the issues that have come up that have been made by this project, and they haven't. Why hasn't they? Because the leverage to achieve a way to address those things was spent with the approval. That's why we need, we can't continue to have this problem of city agencies being siloed and potentially acting against the interests of not just the community, but of the public sometimes. Just nonsensical actions. So we really, really need to have a holistic view here. And I really, many of us have been through this for a long time. And when you're dealing with private agreements with individual developers, you end up oftentimes with those agreements not addressing things that are going to, unanticipatable things that are going to happen in the future. And again, using Atlantic Yards as an example, we just learned only yesterday that the next building being opened with affordable housing won't have a community preference, and likely perhaps the next two after that. And that's because of 421A. That's something that the community benefits agreement didn't anticipate, the project agreements didn't anticipate, and there's no agreement that anticipated that I'm aware of. So we really need, again, a broad-based set of people coming from the community, discussing what the community should be. There's nothing that replaces that. Thanks very much.
Okay, our next two speakers are once again some of the people who spoke on the previous application, and that's Edward Perez and Renzo Ramirez.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak. My name is Edward Perez, Senior Monitoring Director at the Big Apple Group. I would like to comment in favor of this project with considerations for the protection of adjacent structures. Excavation and foundation activities at this project are expected to last about 4 to 5 months, in which that time 280,000 cubic feet of material has to be excavated. With that, also some supportive excavation activities will be conducted along with the footing and foundation wall construction. All activities that could pose a risk to the adjacent structures if not monitored for vibration, or excessive horizontal and vertical displacement. Here at the Big Apple Group, we do propose a comprehensive construction monitoring plan that's going to meet the code requirements. By installing automated seismographs capable of continuous reporting and instant notification, we're able to limit the amount of vibration caused by construction activities that might disturb the neighbors, therefore reducing calls to 311 and complaints. Installing optical monitoring points, small reflective stickers at these adjacent structures will also give us the ability to identify displacement trends before such movement causes any damage to the neighboring buildings during excavation or foundation work. None of this is to frighten any of the neighbors or anything like that. These are all requirements that are in place by the Department of Buildings for the protection of adjacent structures. It's just good to go ahead and mention these things up front, and that neighbors know that there is a solution, for any worry about vibration or any worry about damages to their homes. There are protocols in place for this, and they're perfectly attainable, whether it's through Big Apple or other companies. But anyone interested in having the Big Apple Group conducting, monitoring for the protection of their adjacent structures, I could be reached at 718-767-2900, extension 421. Or if you just want to read more about it, you could go to our website, vibrationmonitoring.com. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
All right. You guys can hear me, right? Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
All right, cool. Thank you. Good evening, Borough President Adams. My name is Renzo Ramirez, and I am a member of 32BJ SEIU here on behalf of the more than 85,000 32BJ members to express our support for this project. We are pleased to announce that the developer EMP Capital has reached out to make an early credible commitment to provide prevailing wage jobs to the future building service workers at this site. These jobs are typically filled by local members of the community, and because of this commitment, will pay family-sustaining wages, which help bring working families into the middle class. These apartments are needed for working people in Brooklyn. This commitment to good prevailing wage jobs will give opportunity for upward mobility, security, and dignity to working class families. 32BJ supports responsible developers who invest in the communities where they build. We know that this development will continue to uphold the industry standard and provide opportunities for working families to thrive. Thank you so much for your time.
Jack Robinson, followed by William Thomas.
Hello again. Hi, I live at 1022 Pacific Street. This is directly across the street from what's proposed in this proposal. Much of this neighborhood is zoned incorrectly, like commercial, industrial. I understand that it's wrong. Like, it needs to be rezoned. We need housing. New York needs new affordable housing. The neighborhood's going to change, and I love change. Though our first developer's dreams on this block, Pacific between Grand and Classen, was 1010 Pacific Street. And it was a destruction of a beautiful old factory. It was a Nabisco factory where there was this ramp that went up, and the delivery horses for the Nabisco cookies went up there, and that's where they slept for the night. That's how old this place was, and it was beautiful, and it was used. It was industrial used. And again, I understand it's not what the neighborhood's about all anymore. And yeah, so it was underutilized and they rezoned. The original buyer then resold it to another developer that broke the promises of keeping this facade and the commitment to give space to a nonprofit community center. Since breaking ground, we have had our house shake enough for pictures to fall off the wall, our backyard and basement to flood due to the lack of land around to soak up during our downpours lately. I have the fear that current applicants will do the same despite the land use committee's plans to enforce rules. Shouldn't we instead encourage encourage the next administration to do the planning? We just voted for new representation. I think I'd really like them to weigh in. During the CB8 land use meetings, there's been a complex and onerous motions that made it really confusing for most members to understand what they were voting on. They didn't feel like they got the details of everything, or if there was details, it was really fast and all of a sudden without much warning. And that's exactly what we're talking about right now. That's how it got through. Infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. There's never been a comprehensive plan on the rest of this neighborhood and how it works around us, in and around us and under us. I saw a really great, easily understood infrastructure plan for the rezoning of East New York. Why can't we get one of those? It seems like a comprehensive neighborhood plan would be the way to make sure things function. This development makes precedence by cutting a swath in the middle of the block from Atlantic to Pacific Street. I don't think that seems like something that we should do in our neighborhood, not haphazardly, not on a one-off basis. We want development, but a planned development that keeps neighborhoods, people, infrastructure in mind. Please reject these proposals. This kind of development is making New York City homogenized and boring. And again, I know, Mayor-elect Adams, you don't like boring. So just please keep our neighborhood real and reject this proposal. Thank you.
William Thomas? William Thomas, do you still wish to speak?
Sarah Lazar.
Hi, thank you. Again am speaking for the Crown Heights Tenant Union in voicing our tenant union's opposition to both of these rezoning applications for the reasons that I won't repeat. I was glad that Mr. Barrick brought up the 421A question. I think that and this is perhaps just for the benefit of the public, but in also explaining the opposition of the Crown Heights Tenant Union. It's worth noting that both of these projects are products of a set of policies that our state and city governments have set up that are essentially incentivizing displacement. I mentioned the reasons why MIH, most people in the tenant movement concur that MIH has been a failure. It's produced about 2,000 affordable units throughout the city since it came into being in about 2016. I think that was when it began. That's very, very little. And what is affordable? Of course, these two applications are choosing option 3. That's excellent. It's the best out of the options that there is. But, as most people recognize, it's simply not enough. The two applications together are going to create about 90 of these affordable units, and those affordable units are great. 40% AMI, the size is good, etc. But it's only going to be about 90 units that are going to be accompanied by approximately 400 unaffordable units in those same buildings. And that doesn't include the unaffordable units that can be produced on the other lots that will be rezoned in addition to the lots that will house these particular projects. So we could potentially conservatively estimate that just these two rezonings could theoretically bring in 1,000 unaffordable units, and that does have an effect on the rest of the neighborhood. The tenant union has member buildings where the landlords are holding rent stabilized units empty in order to combine the units, in order to deregulate them, because that is a loophole that was left in the state laws, in anticipation of the neighborhood being gentrified. And, this is something that has been going on for at least a decade. And I understand that it's a very long process to get a neighborhood rezoning. When these two applicants bought these properties, it was within a system where everything was set up to drive up the price of the land in order to incentivize this kind of development. 421A is another problem. You know, the city of New York gave up almost $2 billion worth of property taxes to 421A just in 2021 alone. That's $2 billion that could have been spent on building affordable, truly affordable housing, you know, rehousing our homeless neighbors. And maybe 421A isn't going to be, but this project was started within a system that assumed that everyone else in the neighborhood, everyone else in the entire state was going to be subsidizing these buildings that we can't afford to live in. And, you know, the assumption that we need to, because a certain amount of investment has been made according to the old system, that we need to approve it within that system because we just assume that the city and the state are going to go along exactly the same way that they always have. It's just unfortunate because we have a new city government. The new state government is very unlikely to renew 421A because everyone realizes that it's a huge boondoggle. In the last 10 years, in the last decade, we've essentially given away $22 billion through this program. And this, you know, if this building were to get 420, we would all be paying for it for the next 35 years. I might be dead at that point. We all might be dead at that point. And, you know, every council member candidate who ran in this district and in a lot of other districts campaigned on the assumption MIH is a problem, we want to reform it. So we're on the precipice potentially of the entire structure changing, the structure that incentivizes the kinds of developments that we can't afford to live in, and to sort of invest in the sunk cost fallacy that because there's been assumption for a long while that things are going to continue in the same way, that we just have to keep going in order to make that past investment worth it. I mean, it's a fallacy for a reason. So, you know, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. You know, I appreciate the fact that 40% AMI sounds pretty good according to how we've been treated by our previous administrations. But, you know, I would just mention that during that 10 years when we gave away $22 billion for the kinds of developments that we can't afford, during that 10 years, this specific community district lost 19,000 Black people. And the census just revealed that. The M Crown area specifically lost 11,000. And to assume that these, you know, potential 90 affordable units, half of which might go to people in this neighborhood, when the status quo has led to 19,000 people being lost, it's just really frustrating. And I would encourage us all to have a bit more hope. Thank you.
Are there any more speakers signed up?
Apologies, I was just having some technical difficulties. We have the option to recall a few speakers, including Karen Kadir, Kaya Kuhl, and Jordan Kramer.
If Karen is no longer here, let me know if I'm the next one to speak.
Karen, you're unmuted.
Oh, hi. No, just the same that I had to say before. I mean, I think the plans need to be looked at more comprehensively. I mean, in terms of how it's changing in the neighborhood.
Want to call our next speaker?
I believe it was Kaya Cool.
Hi, yes. So I want to make a few comments about the process. I know we've been here now for almost 3 hours. I feel like I've watched about 10 to 15 hours worth of land use committee meetings and community board meetings in the last month, really, together with many other people here on the call. And I find this a bit problematic that this is such a small exclusive club of people that apparently I'm now part of. When we talk about these proposals, and it was mentioned before how moving all of this online makes it really difficult for a larger group of people to participate, including the speaker who said that actually wasn't able to register her desire to speak initially. And so what I've watched in these land use committee meetings was a discussion that was filled with this desire to have a comprehensive planning process, as was also mentioned today a lot. And then at times the discussion was solely sort of focused on the chat function of the WebEx application. And only at the very end was there a vote taken on this sort of complex list of priorities that specifically the applicant for this proposal refers to a lot, right? How the requests of the community boards were met. And I would venture to offer that I don't think the members of the community board or the members of the land use committee even fully understood what they ultimately voted for in their recommendation. At least they didn't discuss it in any of these meetings. There was absolutely no discussion about the ranking of these priorities or what the priorities mean. And it wasn't shared with the public, other than similar to the way it was shared tonight, it's very complex language, as you all know. It's a text full of zoning district mentions and use groups that isn't necessarily so easily understood. And so I just find the process of ULURP is unfortunately the only public process that we have to make decisions about developments like this. It's anything but democratic. And I just want you all to caution the way this has been happening, and clearly with a lot of flaws, and yes, just another reason why I believe, as a member of the public who's not privy to the details that are being exchanged among the community board members, to just be really careful, press pause, and I don't see why an agreement between a few members of the community board and the developer represents something that is a benefit to all of us.
Okay, I want to see if Jordan Kramer, whom I called previously, is still available or would like to speak. Otherwise, we again have Nicole Lemler and Y. Roman.
Hello. Yeah, I just would like to make sure that my comments about 888 Atlantic Avenue are being registered for this project as well. And I just want to mention I've been living here since the Barclays Center became approved, and sadly have seen a huge change since then. A big gentrification. My beloved neighbors who lived left and right from me couldn't afford living here anymore. Their houses were sold. There was new buildings, new constructions built. And I am worried that this is going to continue with these high density proposals. My big question is, or my big ask is to please reduce the density. Like I sometimes think of the Lower East Side when the rezoning had happened and high buildings were allowed to be built, how after a short moment that rezoning was changed to lower buildings to honor the existing buildings, which were townhouses. And I hope that our new borough president, our old borough president, our new mayor, whoever will really like pay attention to this, take into account that we are an existing community, we care for each other here, we welcome change and development, but we really, really need this to be in a neighborhood way, in a comprehensive neighborhood plan zoning way. And I know there are many more neighbors actually who would like to join in these conversations. So I really urge to refuse these two proposals. And I thank you for your time.
You were great.
Okay, we have Y. Roman.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yvonne Roman, and I am a homeowner on Pacific Street. I don't have, I have my opinions, but it's not a yes or no on both of these projects. I think the buildings are beautiful. The area is underutilized. I've been here 50 years, and we've asked for a lot of changes. Back in the day, no one listened to us. Anyway, so my situation now is developments on both sides of me, and my house is 110 years old. I don't know if there's any risk assessments were made, but I just want to offer my my help to my neighbors because this process is going to be the hardest thing you would ever come across is when your house is vibrating, all of that. Just take all that into account. I just want to offer my help with my neighbors because I want to let them know what to expect. I've been dealing with developers for 6 years. 6 years. I haven't been able to rent. I've gone to City Hall, all of that. All they say is call my office in the morning. No one does anything. I believe all of this is going to go through because, Brooklyn is changing. And I just want to offer my help to my neighbors. I'm here and I will be walking around, maybe speaking to them. So it's any other projects. Thank you.
Okay, we have no other speakers at this time. We can do one last call for perhaps anyone who spoke on the previous application and is interested in speaking on this one as well.
And again, if Will Thomas is back since he was called before.
We also have 2 people on the phone tie-in.
Great. If we could give Will Thomas an opportunity and then move to the phone lines.
Hello, is this for, this isn't with regard to 87088 Atlantic, right?
No, this is 1034 to 1042.
Yeah, I have no comment on this project, so you're good to go.
I'm going to be opening the phone lines. If you wish to speak, please state your name. Phone lines are opened. If you're on the phone lines, if you wish to speak, the phone lines are unmuted. Going once. Going twice. Phone lines are muted again.
And Richard, just, we also would reserve the right to respond to the borough president in writing to some of the comments made by the opposition as well.
Absolutely. We still have several weeks that we could take information. And in fact, because people said it is possible that others might have wanted to participate, although we actually have had more speakers through the electronic format than we did in person. But this video will be posted in a few days. And so people could watch tonight's proceedings, and we're still going to encourage people to submit email comments to ask Eric at brooklynbp.nyc.gov. So that, again, there's still several more weeks, and people could have the benefit of watching this video when it's made available before submitting their comments.
Okay, if there are no other speakers, Richard, do you want to close the item?
Yeah, and I just see a chat from Nicole. Yvonne, Nicole be interested in having a conversation with you. I don't know if you want to give out your address to have her knock on your door or something. You could put in a chat to us and we could try to share it with Nicole. And calendar item number 2 is closed.
The hearing on these items is now closed. Thank you for participating in this remote public hearing. Borough President Adams will review the applications heard today and submit his recommendations to the City Planning Commission for further consideration. Borough President Adams would like to take this opportunity to remind you that the City Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on these items, which will be announced at a later date. We would also like to remind viewers that comments can be submitted by email to askeric@brooklynbp.nyc.gov. This hearing is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Have a good night, everyone.
Take care. Thank you, Richard.
Be well.